So kind of the experience I just described, I experienced as a meaning crisis, a sort of individual meaning crisis, where I'd had this narrative and this worldview that was my basis for meaning and purpose and making sense of the world. And then I experienced that sort of fall away and disappear. And that was occasioned by, phenomenologically, all this sort of vertiginous confusion, loss of orientation, sense of despair, a sense of anxiety, uncertainty, a kind of desperation for grounding, foundations, orientation, that sort of a thing. And then a kind of fundamental dissolution of the basis for a lot of givens, things about, why do we do what we do? Why do we treat other people the way that we treat other people? What's the basis of ethics, morality? I find that orientation is sort of a good way of thinking about these issues of what orients us in the world, what helps us navigate the world, and that's precisely kind of what you lose in an individual experience of a meaning crisis. And so in terms of the meaning crisis, the way that I think about that is sort of that phenomenological description that I just gave, sort of writ large, like experiencing that at a collective level. That there's sort of a pervasive sense of existential confusion and malaise and lack of orientation, a kind of desperate casting about for frameworks to help navigate the world, and sort of the various kinds of unsuccessful ways or incomplete ways that resolves itself in individual lives. But yeah, the meaning crisis I tend to think of as sort of a collective version of what individually can happen when people kind of get the foundations knocked out from under them. And that can happen in all sorts of ways too. I just differentiate between like vertigo, which is kind of what I've just described, where you kind of have a framework and then it disappears, and so you kind of are falling through the void. That's one experience, but it requires that you first have some sense of meaning to begin with that you lose. But a lot of people don't really have that. Even growing up, we just grow up in a context where a lot of these frameworks are no longer things that people buy into anymore. So people more and more don't even have a kind of familiarity with any, say, like religious framework or what have you. And so in that context, it's much more like nausea, which is what Sartre described in, kind of his existentialist writing, where like nothing really seems to matter. Things move about, they change, experiences are tacked onto experiences, people come, they go, and that's basically all there is. And in that sense, there's not even really, there's a sense that something's off, like that this isn't right, that there's something missing. But it's almost like you've kind of been born blind and never knew what vision was. And so you're just sort of like, well, this isn't quite right. And so, yeah, it's sort of like the difference between like going blind versus being born blind or something like that. The difference between losing something versus never having it. But in each case, there's a sense that something is no longer there. And there's a sense of absence or lack or something missing. And so, yeah, I would say that versions of those two things characterize our collective meaning crisis, and then people respond to that situation in all sorts of ways, and most of them are not particularly constructive or successful or lead to their own flourishing or the flourishing of society. So that's what makes it sort of a real collective challenge.